Hello, I'm Chris Chu, an artist and designer. Personally, I'm very interested in storytelling and also hearing grandmother stories. Grandmother story is something that people associate with history that was actually shared to their grandchildren.
My artwork centers on all things retro, from childhood playgrounds to toys and snacks. I turn nostalgic images into functional everyday objects. I create these artworks so that we can keep these memories of old Singapore alive.
So in a way, it connects the older generation with the younger generation through storytelling.
For my next project, I want to create an artwork that pays homage to the infamous chewing gum.
Chewing gum is like a missing piece among a lot of Singaporeans where they don't get to consume. I want to know more about the untold stories about chewing gum to bring that golden moment back into Singapore through art. I was born right after the banning of chewing gum, and the only time we get to try is every year we went back to Malaysia to visit my grandparents. We do a lot of throwing of chewing gum, sticking here and there in Malaysia that we probably can't do in Singapore.
I imagine back then you will see lots of gum advertisements everywhere. People old and young will be chewing gum, and maybe some creative folk like me will use it as blue tack. But all this poof into oblivion the night chewing gum was banned in 1992. Even if gum wasn't banned, I'm guessing that there might have been some sort of designated area for gum chewing, just like the smoking area we know today. To understand what life was like back when chewing gum wasn't yet banned, I turned to one of the oldest grocery stores I can find.
During the time I was a gum lover. Because my father was running the shop, so I can get it for free.
Being the third generation owner of a grocery store, Rodney has been able to observe changes in the everyday life of Singaporeans through the things they buy.
So do you have any stories regarding chewing gum itself and how the lifestyle was like?
Everybody can buy freely, so there's no restriction. I started chewing gum when I was in secondary school because we start to watch the football game. And then, especially all the American Hollywood stars and the English football, all the managers all start chewing. And then we start to imitate them. You can suck it in. And then there's a tiak sound. You can make sound also. Yeah. So sometimes we do it so often at home, and then my sisters and my parents will get irritated. Yeah, we tiak, watching TV. Yeah, so sometimes they can get irritated.
Rodney also shares with me one of his dating tricks. As a teenager who was always broke, he would bring his date to the cinema, buy chewing gum which only cost 10 cents, and it would last them throughout the entire movie.
If your girlfriend sitting beside you, they also you smell fresh also. You also know you smell good. But once you get out from the chair, you put your finger underneath the chair to lift up, you can feel something there, sticky.
The sticky stuff was someone else's chewing gum. Ew. And if you try to wipe it off the wrong way, the result was disastrous. For better or worse, everyone was chewing gum. It was simply part of everyday life back then.
After when the ban kicked in, there are people who still come and ask, but we tell them we cannot sell. But they still get a fix across the causeway. If I know any friend that going to Malaysia, I'll ask them to, hey, buy a box of the chewing gum back for me. But when they buy it for us, we cannot put it in the shop and sell because we will get fined.
So when Ronnie shared the experiences he had with chewing gum, somehow I able to visualize the artwork that I'm going to create and how this artwork could actually further develop into something positive and the next generation could easily relate to. There are so many different positive stories that I actually heard from him. So now it makes me wonder why Singapore want to ban chewing gum.
To find the answer, I turned to the internet. And I am quickly immersed in the sheer amount of information available.
It's quite a serious problem, sticking chewing gum.
There was even a chewing gum villain who terrorized residents in Toa Payoh for 2 weeks by repeatedly vandalizing leaf buttons. A mechanic had to hide on top of the leaf like a human CCTV just to catch him in the act.
It's something so ridiculous. Why will people actually stick on something that will be used by the public?
And based on this article here,
The problem is not just about the littering, it's about the cost every year removing chewing gum that is stuck on the floors and the walls in the housing estates of all our HDB flats.
it's interesting to find so many stories about chewing gum. Because not only was it a nuisance, it also cost the nation lots of money. So was littering the reason behind the ban? I'm Chris Chu. I make artworks that celebrate all things retro. And I'm on a mission to create a new artwork paying tribute to Singapore's long-lost friend, the chewing gum. I've learned chewing gum was a big part of the lives of Singaporeans. And so was littering. Was this the reason behind the ban? So I meet with the person who sold us chewing gum in the first place.
When I work for Wrigley's company, the company has chewing gum on the table in conference room.
Dr. Ong worked as a sales manager for Wrigley Company, one of the largest chewing gum manufacturers in the world.
When we went for a meeting, we just go and grab a chewing gum and chew, and we have our meeting with the gum in the mouth.
Oh.
So elsewhere, it was rude to have a chewing gum in your mouth in a meeting. But in Wrigley's, it wasn't rude, it was a way of life.
Dr. Ong, you were a manager of Wrigley Company back then before the banning of chewing gum was introduced. Somehow, littering actually linked back to the banning of chewing gum. Is it how it goes?
As a manager of Wrigley's company, our market share was increasing in an increasing market. And because of this increased sales, that's where we got ourselves into trouble. Because this increased sales led to increased littering. So when you went to HDB flat, you see on the floor, wow, more and more those black patches. I think it would be very difficult to remove those chewing gum. Very difficult chewing gum. And that's how we got ourselves into trouble.
What an ironic position to be in. The more successful they were, the closer they got to the chewing gum apocalypse. However, Dr. Ong tells me that the chewing gum ban didn't happen overnight. It was done in various stages.
To reinforce that message that we want to restrict the sales of chewing gum, the government came out and says that, okay, we're also going to ban the advertisement of chewing gum.
Dr. Ong says that while the advertisement ban happened in 1983, it took almost 10 years before the government banned the sale of chewing gum under the Sale of Food Act in 1992.
They were discouraging the consumption of chewing gum. Then they introduced saying that you can have for consumption but no distribution, which means very simple that if you chew gum by yourself, it's not an offense. But if you bring in 10 cartons of chewing gum to distribute, to sell, then that is an offense. So consumption of chewing gum is not banned. This is where a lot of misunderstanding. It was never banned. We can consume chewing gum.
It makes me wonder, when the advertisement ban was first put in place, did Willie try to turn the tide in any way?
One of the things I remember that we did mention was that we will supply the bins and down there, please throw your gums here, something like that.
So it's like a bin for cigarette butt, but it's for chewing gum.
But of course, that was never not enough.
Dr. Ong says that he left Wrigley Company in 1984, 8 years before the chewing gum ban kicked in. So he can't say conclusively if littering was the reason behind the ban. That leaves me with just one more question to ask.
So Dr. Ong, do you have any chewing gum at home?
Wow, you are lucky, man. I just got a pack of chewing gum here. Yeah. Yeah, have it.
Sure. I feel that it's what the Singapore government wanted to bring across, a strong message to let the public know that this is something that we actually wanted to stop. At the end of the day, due to the main reason of how this gum itself cannot be effectively removed, that could be one of the main reasons that is why the government would like to ban this gum.
But the government took almost 10 years to properly ban the sale of chewing gum since the Act ban in 1983. If the problem was as straightforward as littering, why did it take so long? There must be more to the story here. I need to take my research up a notch.
There were campaigns to try to educate people, but over 10 years, it was shown that it was not really working.
Dr. Lai Chi Kiat is an urban historian who has studied the evolution of Singapore's public policies, one of them being the chewing gum ban.
The banning of chewing gum, is it just because of littering?
Yeah, it contributed to the banning. From the 80s onwards, a lot of the public facilities have chewing gum litter. So this problem has been building up. But one of the things that triggered a ban was in 1990 when the MRT doors, there was chewing gum on doors. It caused it to malfunction.
So the final straw was actually the MRT, our very own mass rapid transit train system.
In a move to keep public places clean, chewing gum will be banned in Singapore. The Environment Ministry says littering by spent gum is a perennial problem. In the MRT, callously disposed gum stops doors from closing, disrupting train service and incurring unnecessary cost.
So by 1992, the law came in place. You can see that the time between the chewing gum on MRT doors right up to the ban on 3rd of January 1992 was just 4 or 5 months. So that was really sort of the last institution that was involved.
So what made the MRT so important that it led to an outright ban on the sale of chewing gum? Just to protect it?
Well, Singapore has been relying on bus system. By the time it reached 1992, it would not be sufficient for Singapore because by that time there would be a bigger population. So in 1972 to 1980, there were 3 phases of a serious discussion about the possibilities of MRT.
Dr. Lai says that these discussions ultimately recognized that an MRT system would prevent roads from getting seriously congested. Plus, it would also boost Singapore's developed nation status. But due to the high building cost of $5 billion, the government took a whole decade studying, planning, even debating on television. Until eventually in 1982, they finally announced they will go ahead with the MRT system.
It's finally here. 4.5 years after the first clump of earth was turned near the Novena station, the trains are ready to go.
So once the MRT system was in place, it became a very big convenience. And therefore, if anything happened to that kind of convenience, it would actually disrupt the whole functioning of the city. Singapore also had an international image, right, as a clean and efficient city. So if the trains were not working properly, then of course there is a problem with that kind of efficiency in the city.
Now I understand why is it so important in Singapore.
Yes, a lot of effort and money have been put into it.
So after chatting with CK, I actually realized that the main contributors towards this banning is actually MRT itself. I didn't know that just because of this chewing gum, there are such a big impact on MRT system itself that could actually jam up or disrupt the public users. Then it makes me wonder how this small little gum able to jam up the MRT train door.
It sounds so improbable, and yet it's true. So how did the humble chewing gum bring a $5 billion train system to its knees? I'm an artist and I have chosen chewing gum to be the subject of my next artwork. I have learned that train disruptions were one of the main reasons why the sale of gum was banned in Singapore in 1992. But I have yet to understand how this tiny thing could have caused them. So I get a pro to help me out.
The first section of the track consists of like 5 stations from Yio Chu Kang all the way to Toa Payoh.
Today I'm meeting Matthew, a train enthusiast who is pretty much obsessed with all things rail related.
Next station, Ang Mo
I'm very curious about how this tiny little chewing gum itself could actually jam up the whole system and it disrupt our daily lives.
The way that our MRT door works, right? You might think that there's actually like an infrared sensor detecting each door.
Yeah.
But back in the days in 1991, the train doors are essentially not intelligent. They can only detect whether all the doors are fully closed or fully open.
According to Matthew, early MRT doors were equipped with simple sensors. When the doors were fully closed, the sensors will release the locks on the train and allow the train to move. But anything larger than a few centimeters could stop the doors from closing properly and triggering the sensors. And should one door fail to close, the whole 6-carriage train will not be able to leave the station.
So it means that you just need one person that actually chew 3 to 4 gums to actually block up that sensor in a way to jam up the whole system.
Correct. Back then, the trains, they cannot detect which individual door is not fully closed. So they have to isolate the whole train, which means to take the train out from service to rectify what's the fault, which is just a tiny gum.
I get to find out a lot more about what makes the gum actually something so small to jam up the doors. It only takes about 5 cm to prevent it from closing.
Meeting Matthew has made me understand the importance of the chewing gum ban. But now I'm curious, how did Singaporeans react to it when it was enforced in 1992? I imagine all store owners in Singapore protested by chewing gum right in front of Parliament House, while gum chewers island-wide rebelled by sticking more gum onto lift buttons or train doors. And kids who were caught spitting gum onto the ground were arrested by the police and thrown into jail. It must have been a chaotic moment the day chewing gum was banned, I guess?
No, that's never discussed in the historical record.
As a historian, Professor Gregory Clancy has dug around quite a bit in the story of the chewing gum ban.
It became kind of a hot issue in the press, and it was reported that a lot of people opposing it, but that's about it.
The truth is, only a small number of people got into trouble. 2 weeks into the ban, the government only prosecuted 5 people for selling chewing gum, and 2,000 advisory tickets were issued. People just accepted it. Chewing gum and all the problems caused by it simply disappeared.
So why banning of chewing gum in Singapore is so well known throughout the world?
Yeah, well, the government had the bad luck to ban chewing gum here just at the moment that George Bush, the American president, was coming for trade talks. And that was in early 1992. And he brought with him lots of reporters, naturally. And they immediately picked up on the fact that the country had just banned chewing gum.
Right, just naturally,
Yeah.
you know.
So they reported that very widely around the world. Of course, a lot of other countries would love to be able to ban chewing gum, particularly cities as well. Let me show you this article, for example. So the ban on chewing gum after 1992 became so famous around the world that it became standard to incorporate that bit of information in almost every article about Singapore. It's a general article from the foreign press criticizing a number of policies in Singapore. It doesn't mention chewing gum until the very last line when it says, "No wonder they were able to ban chewing gum." This becomes a kind of symbolic, unfortunately.
So that's how they actually associate banning of chewing gum with Singapore. So that's how we actually get well known, other than the cleanliness now as compared to the past. Even though the government has been criticized by the foreign media for banning chewing gum, in reality it was for very practical reasons, and not only that. The cleaning of gums actually costs 50 times more as compared to the one they are buying. To me, as a Singaporean that's actually born right after the ban, I didn't realize that it was banned until I actually visited my late grandparents back in Malaysia, where I get to chew gum. I wanted to find out more about the stories behind it, the stories that are not known or hidden, that I wanted to bring it back. It's like a sort of memories that was lost but actually found through art. Through all these people that I've met, I kind of input all this information, put it across using visuals. So by drawing it out, I hope to use it as a sharing tools to the younger generation. So in this artwork itself, it consists of not just the positive side of it, but also the negative side, and how all this also contributed to this banning.